Finance Committee to just review any outstanding details and enable other members of the Board of Education who do not sit on the Finance Committee to attend. I know there are a couple that either will be late or will not be able to make it tonight. But the goal is just to provide an overview, and today is the day where we have to submit the preliminary budget to the County Executive Superintendent. So the budget now is essentially the one that will be presented to the voters unless there is a change of heart or change of mind on the part of the Board of Education from now until March 23rd, which is the final public budget hearing. So I'll start off just by reviewing again the goals for this budget that were set forth by the Finance Committee earlier on in the year, and they were essentially to maintain all district programs in their current form. In other words, not to cut any program or cut any staff, and then to deliver the budget at the lowest cost possible to the taxpayers to try to continue the district's record of efficient spending. Once again, we talk about how Chatham compares with other school districts of similar demographic, and this is just a chart that shows three metrics: the per pupil budgetary cost taken from the Taxpayer's Guide to Education Spending, the percentage of students who participate in an AP test junior, senior year, and then students who are enrolled in college or university settings 16 months after graduation. And with charts like these, we see that Chatham has a comparatively low per pupil budgetary cost, but it has excellent outcomes in relation to other school districts like us. Just looking at Morris County and the per pupil budgetary cost of all of the K through 12 districts in Morris County, we have the lowest cost per pupil outside of Dover. Every other K through 12 district from Morristown to Roxbury to Parsippany all spend more per pupil than Chatham does. And we're about $1,500 or $1,600 below the county average. So since the last meeting that we had 2 weeks ago, we've learned a few things. First, we got confirmation from the state that our aid would be held flat again this year. Last year we had a very modest increase in state aid, but it was essentially flat, and the year before it was flat as well. So basically we're on 3 years of flat aid. We also qualified this year for a waiver to the tax levy. That's just additional taxing authority, and that was a result of health insurance, state increases in health insurance. So the Board of Education could, if it wanted to, go above 2% and tax, if you will, up to $183,000 of additional levy. And so the maximum tax levy increase the board could entertain would be about $1.3 million or a 2.3% overall tax levy increase. The last 2 years, again, so the max would be 2.3% unless there were second questions proposed by the Board of Education. This year, the Board of Education has not sought to propose any second question. So over the past 2 years, the tax levy increase was 3.34%, 3.46% respectively, and the board at the present time has not considered going to that kind of a number. So in terms of expenditures, as I mentioned earlier, obviously to conform with the goals of trying to maintain program and class sizes, the budget seeks to spend sufficient monies to do that. We also have a couple of capital improvements that we've been working on. Those include restrooms at Chatham High School, and for the second year now, money set aside to pave the Washington Avenue School parking lot, which is in rough shape. And then again, year after year, we always try to invest enough in staff, in particular in the special education areas where we have grown our programs to hold more kids in district. So sorry, this is a little bit small and dark, but we'll post it on the website. This is just an overview of expenditures. If there's specific questions about this chart, Peter DeQuilla can speak to them. I can double back after I go through the whole presentation to look at this more closely, but you can see on the right-hand column is the percent change over last year, and in most categories The instructional categories at the top of the page, extracurricular activities, school counseling, curriculum and instruction, health benefits, employee benefits rather, were about 2% or so. Those are our increases. There are some numbers where we are below 2%, but for the most part you can see that we're kind of in the 2% range when it comes to expenditures moving into this year's budget. The tax levy increase that the Finance Committee, when it met on Wednesday night, recommended to, or will recommend tonight to the full Board of Education is a 1.77% tax increase. This is enough, the committee feels, to sustain programs as is and to include some small capital improvements in the budget. And so therefore the board is not going to move to the max tax increase of 2.3% or consider a second question. Looking at the tax impact on the typical household, or the, I shouldn't say typical, but $700,000 home or per $100,000 of assessed value, you can see that the tax levy increase this year is less than it has been in the past couple of years, should the Board of Education approve the 1.77%. Just in terms of a look back, 10 years back, this is the lowest tax levy increase in at least a dozen years. That's all that I really have at my fingertips in terms of comparison. So it's a small increase by comparison to prior years. It's also much smaller, as I said, than the tax levy increases per $100,000 of assessed value of the past 2 years. It's about 40% lower than last year's tax impact. So as a result of not going to the maximum 2% plus waiver, what that means is that the district will have banked cap. So the way that the law works in the state of New Jersey is that if a district spends or exercises less than the maximum amount of taxation authority, that difference, the delta between what it actually asks for and what it could ask for, is pushed into something called banked cap, which enables the district to tap that any time in the next 3 years in terms of taxing authority. So unlike this year where we don't have any banked cap available from previous years, next year we know that the board, if it moved forward with a 1.77 increase, would have about $313,000 of extra taxing authority. It's also interesting, this was just in the paper this week, we're now down to, according to the Star Ledger and School Boards Association, 18 school districts out of over 500 that continue to have a budget vote. So there's one other in Morris County, none in Union County, none in Somerset County, and the numbers sort of speak for themselves. So at this point, we have the preliminary budget submittal to the Executive County Superintendent, and barring any change over the next 2 weeks, this would be the budget that is submitted to the taxpayers for vote on April 21st. And that is the overview of the budget.
Can you go back to the slide that shows the colored slides?
Nope.
When you show the split between the township and the borough, is it similar to what was last year, where in this case the township, when we look at the split between the township and the borough, is it still, last year I believe it was, the township was a little higher than the borough? That's the trend that's been?
Yep.
Because I know we flip back and forth. I just wanted to.
Yeah, so for 3 years now, the township has borne the brunt of the tax levy increase.
Okay.
And that continues this year.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if Peter needs to say anything. Matt, if you want to say anything. Jill?
No, I have nothing to say.
I just want to ask Mr. Belding's same question from last week. I was in the finance meeting and we asked it, but I just wanted to double check. Again, at 1.77, you're confident that we can still maximize our results, maximize our performance, not leave ourselves in any compromising position at 1.77?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that something that we would be able to replicate next year and the year after? Obviously, I'm asking you to speculate, but does that reflect a trending downward of certain fundamental costs, that's other than perhaps energy?
Well, I mean, the goal certainly would be to replicate it year after year. If health insurance costs can remain manageable, and this year we had a more manageable increase in health insurance costs than we did in the prior 2 years. But that's been in part a result of sticking with one carrier and making some other changes. And our special education costs have also moderated, and that was something we anticipated because of the investments we've been making in programs that retain kids as they advance through the grades. So we're hopeful that this would continue, but I, of course, can't make you any promise.
Thank you.
I can just, one question I have actually is, can you just remind me, or Pete, remind me, on a net basis, after debt service, what the per house figure is on a referendum? Oh, sorry. Can you remind me, and at the latest figures, what the numbers are on a per household basis for the referendum?
Per $100,000 of assessed value, the number is about $30, or $25 if you factor in the savings from the refinancing.
So what's the overall net figure? No, it's 20, whatever the number is, 25, but on an absolute, with debt relief that we get from the state, what is it per household?
25.
No, I know, I understand that, but
Well,
on a per household figure, that number comes out to what? We were using, it was a 200 at one point, is it 180?
Oh, for a $700,000 home, it was about 178.
178 and something.
The only two things I'd like to add in response, following up to Michelle's question, or Ms. Clark's question, right now, the borough has approximately 41% of the tax burden, and the township 59%. And the only other date that I'd like to add to the last slide is that the budget will be advertised in the Daily Record on or prior to March 18th. So if everybody looks in the paper for the advertised budget, that's when it will hit the paper, either the March 18th or prior.
And Peter, if we can take care of some of the facilities that have been neglected with the referendum, going back to Tom's question of it being a trend, if we can take care of some of our infrastructure with the referendum, it would most likely be that we can maintain this. If we can't maintain the facilities, if the referendum doesn't pass, then we would need to start building up capital reserve again, correct?
Even with the referendum, we should still be prudent and fund capital reserve to the extent we can, for the fact that even outside the referendum, there are other things that still need to be done.
Sure,
to
but the
schools.
1.77 represents a lower capital reserve than in past years, correct?
Well, it's hard to judge, but I would presume with a 1.77% tax increase, we were very lean with our budgeting. I would not anticipate a large amount of money left come June of 2016 to put into capital reserve, yes.
Okay, so that was a long way to get to yes.
But that being said, with the ESIP program going through, is that most of the projects that we would have taken on from a cap reserve aspect will be funded through an ulterior initiative. So I don't think doing it this way is not going to put us back in terms of our cap reserve projects that we have from a priority standpoint at all.
Okay.
Yes, the ESIP will address energy-related projects which we need to get accomplished, not a brick-and-mortar type project.
You might just want to spend a second and review for the public what the ESIP program is and why we're talking about that.
The ESIP program is an energy savings improvement plan. What happens is the district has chosen Honeywell as the vendor. They have come in and reviewed the district facilities and proposed a list of projects that will be completed to save energy in the district. The interesting part is, out of all of these projects, when you net them together, with any discounts or rebates that are available on the equipment, the projects will have a net cash flow to pay for themselves over a 15-year period, so the district will have no expense or no outlay to get this funded. The project is currently in third-party review to make sure that all the claims by Honeywell are warranted and correct, and we hope to begin hopefully over the summer or in the early parts of the next school year.
So this is independent of the referendum. There's no,
yes.
there's no part of this in the referendum. This is just
No, the ESIP is a totally separate
self-financing.
thing that's been board approved, and as long as the third party verifies the rates, then the district will proceed regardless of the budget or referendum.
No more questions up here today, so if there's any questions from the public, please come up to the microphone, sign in on the budget. Oh, yeah, just the budget only, sorry. Come on up to the microphone. You have to come up to the microphone and sign in. State your name.
These are for comments on the budget itself, the operating budget of the district, not the referendum. Yep.
In the slides where you compare last year's budget with this year and the difference in percentage, one of the biggest items becomes, because I guess the administration has done a good job in working for the special eds and the health insurance, this one. The biggest, one of the biggest items becomes maintenance. My question is, has there been considerations either recently or in the past into looking into opportunities to optimize that cost through sharing services with other entities, be it township or the borough, or I say that because when looking into the dropping of the kids at the schools, we go through spaces where we see people, you know, taking care of our schools, doing the maintenance, outside maintenance and inside maintenance, I guess. And from my perspective, I look at those places that used to be auto shops and wood shops and workshops, and has been repurposed at some point for those crews. So is there an opportunity to rethink a little bit that strategy, both from the space usage, and I think Mr. Barna has suggested that last time, to look into if we could reuse that, this is at the high school, that space for curricular purposes, or functionally, in terms of looking into, is there any cost-saving opportunities with the entities that where we belong. Other towns do that. I don't know if it's appropriate or applicable to us, or if there has been any thoughts, or if there could be any thoughts in the future for that.
So I guess it sounds like there are two questions, Mr. Moulin, right? The maintenance facility itself and whether we can repurpose that space, and then shared services in general, and are we, you know, communicating with the borough or the township or others to try to optimize the resources available?
Right, so the maintenance core also in the fact there is a bit of spaces for maintenance. So, you know, overall question about does maintenance belong to where the schools are? You know, does it have to be there, or all this question?
So on the first question, we have looked and even had some preliminary plans drawn up years ago, probably a good 5 years ago now, to try to move maintenance out of its current location and use that area for classrooms or these offices actually. It was cost prohibitive at the time when we looked at that, and we did look at other sites both in the district and out of the district, either to rent for our maintenance staff, like garages and so forth, or building some kind of structure, and Cougar Field was the area where we were looking at. That didn't materialize. We didn't think there was enough of a, it wasn't cost efficient in part because of what's contained in the maintenance area, those bays and everything else there. In terms of shared services, we have spoken and had some preliminary exploratory conversations with the township. We do utilize their custodial services here. We do work closely with them during the winter months to secure materials like salt and that kind of thing. And Peter might be able to speak better than I can about you know, some of the other areas. Trying to think of.
The other one that the district utilizes through the township, we buy fuel from the township, which obviously is a much better rate than we would get it from anywhere else. The unfortunate part is I've talked more to the township about it, but with their budget constraints, as I'm sure the same as in the borough, they're tight and don't have a lot of excess manpower for what they need to do. So there isn't a lot of times that they can, provide us labor or efficiencies. But we do share equipment if needed, if they have something that we want or we have something that they want to use. We're open and work well together.
Thank you for hearing my question. Joyce Martinson from the Borough. Concerning this budget, I'm not clear on, and maybe this is a stupid question, but hopefully there are no stupid questions. The savings where do we see the savings that the 20-year bond that was just paid off, where does that show in the budget? I don't know. I'm trying to understand, because I remember...
Okay, you have to remember is that a referendum, the finances associated with a referendum are on your general tax statement.
Okay.
Okay, the general tax statement, which is your town statement, is separate from your Board of Ed taxes. So you would not see the decline of that bond if it would come off on your Board of Ed budget. You would see it on your general tax budget, which is your town budget.
So we should see the $1 a day for 20 years, the 365 days, dollars a year that we have been paying for the last 20 years for that old bond that's now paid off, our mortgage is paid off. So my bank account should have...
It has nothing to do with your mortgage. It's
Well,
all just your taxes.
I'm calling it a mortgage, it's a 20-year bond that we had, that we paid off. It's over now. So will we see a decrease in our taxes because that bond has been paid off, and then it would come back on again if the referendum passes and we spend that much money now?
I would imagine it's contiguous, correct? So
The issue the issue comes that the refunding of the bond, basically the lower interest rates the lower payments start taking effect considering school year wise in the 15-16 school year and beyond. And due to the repayment, the 15-16 year has a very small savings. So if the district did nothing else, you would start as Mr. Gilfillan explained, the part of your taxes from the town and the borough would decrease in the 16-17 school year for the refinancing and the one bond maturity.
Okay. And that would be about $365 a year per household, or depending on...
I don't have the dollar amount, so I can't confirm your number.
So I'd have to go to the borough, and the people that live in the township would have to go to the township and see where on the tax bill that decrease is. Because you're never going to see a tax decrease on your bill. You realize that, there's never going to be that.
I cannot comment on that.
Oh, well, I can, because I pay it every year, and you never see it go down. But I was hoping this year we would see that minus the bond that was paid, and then if in fact something else gets passed that we want to spend another, 20 million, then it would start up again. Am I wrong in thinking that way?
No, I think you're right. My understanding is that when the 2005 referendum was passed, the payments for that referendum were structured. So when the 95 referendum expired, the 2005, the payments associated with the 2005 referendum would take the place. It was backloaded.
Okay.
So the savings that you would expect to see, if there were no referendum this year, or no referendum were approved this year,
You wouldn't see it for 2 years?
the savings you would see would be the result of the refunding of the current debt. We just are in the process of finishing refinancing or refunding the current debt load that we have from the 99 bond and the 2005 bond. And what you describe, I believe, is accurate. You would see in the portion of the tax bill not associated with the operating budget of the district. The operating budget of the district that's not reflected here. It would be reflected in the other portion of your taxes that you're paying to either the borough or the township.
And why is it that a referendum wouldn't be I mean, it's part of the school budget now in this, in the discussions budget, you know, but then all of a sudden it's detached. I don't understand that.
The issue or the referendum gets detached because once the referendum is approved, the borough and township must pay the referendum back over, let's say, the 20-year life. So in the craziest example, if the school district ceased to operate tomorrow and just or I should say at June 30th and closed its doors, the township and the borough would still need to pay off the current bonds.
Boy, that sounds dangerous. I mean, if there's no schools, that sounds
Obviously-
dangerous.
Obviously, my example is trying to be very illustrative, that once the township and the borough approve a bond, they are on the hook to pay that bond over the life. And that comes outside of the school budget. And the borough and the township are committed to pay that bond back over its life. And then the school budget is on top of that. So basically, as we said, any savings you would see would be out of the borough and township portion of their payments. Now, I can't speak for either entity. They may say, oh, we have this much less, I'm going to use that money elsewhere to control my tax
But somebody has
increase.
to ask us that.
Well,
I mean,
That is
right?
something you'd have to
The
ask
two-
Mr.
the two
Falzarano
governments would have to ask
or
us
Mr.
that.
Chiccarone.
Yeah. So it doesn't make a lot of, I mean, it sounds, it's hard to swallow that there would be so much work on this end, you know, to get it, something passed, but then once it's passed, it's like, okay, you know, it goes to somebody else. There's no accountability on you guys.
No, there is
I don't really-
accountability. You have to look at it this way. When you buy your house, if you sign up and get approved for a 20-year fixed mortgage,
Right,
your payment, you must make that same payment every
Right.
month for 20 years.
right.
That is the same thing that happens with the bond. The township and the borough need to make that same payment every year for 20 years.
So then so then the two governments, the town and the borough, have to work closely with the schools to get that money back to you to build whatever you want to build or spend whatever you want to spend.
That is different.
Oh.
Once the bond is approved, like for example, in 2005, the bonds were approved, the district had the list of projects, the district gets to spend up to that amount, and then the bonds get expended, and then the township and the borough get the amount that's due.
Okay, well, I was not at all aware of that, and, you know, maybe if there was some type of a strategic plan so that, you know, we could all get involved in something like that, there'd be a lot more knowledgeable residents, because I'm totally in the dark with something like this. And, you know, I guess we have to start boning up on
I
all
don't think
that.
it's all as complicated as it might appear to be. It's simply the budget that is approved by the voters in the school election initiates the taxation authority that is executed by the municipality. We don't have a tax collector within the school district. The municipalities have tax collectors. It's their job to collect the taxes that the voters approve. Whether that be the annual budget or a referendum, I don't think it really makes
But the
any
operating
difference.
budget goes over to you fellows and gals, fine, but
All of
it's
these payments come back to us through the tax collector. They,
Okay.
in turn, pay us.
okay,
Correct. That's how we pay our bills. But they collect the taxes. There's no change in that. It has always operated that way. That's the way the statute has it. It's really not very
okay.
complicated.
Well, then, it might have
The
been,
town, the municipality has the tax collecting authority.
okay, all right.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Are there any other questions on the budget that was proposed? If not, we're going to close the public finance session. One question, very good. Then we'll close after you.
Sorry, Donna Charles, just a quick question. The cost per pupil again, how much was that?
$12,954.
12,000?
954?
Okay, thank you. If you take the 65 million, sorry, where is my, and divide that by 4,200 students, it doesn't come out to 12,000.
What's the 65 million?
Your budget. Sorry, okay. Your total budget will be, including debt service and everything, is $65,959,024. Okay, if you divide that by, you're saying that there's 4,200 students in the coming school year, approximately, that does not come out to $12,000 per student. It comes out more, over $15,000 per student. So I was wondering, what is omitted from this figure when you're figuring the per student cost?
Sure.
What is not averaged? What is
So
not
we
put in there?
don't calculate the per pupil cost, the state does. So if you go to the DOE website and you go to the Taxpayer's Guide for Education Spending,
Okay.
they have different ways of calculating what a district pays on a per pupil budgetary basis. So they strip out certain items, for example, security and transportation are stripped out. So New Providence, as an example, they don't have any busing in New Providence. We have busing. To try to get to a figure that is comparable, the state takes those costs out. Then there are other items like capital outlay and some others that the state does not include in the figure.
So in other words, the state's objective is to allow the public to compare apples to apples by
Well,
trying to put all the districts on a level playing field, correct?
Well, I find that you just mixed up the apples and the oranges, because, like, for instance, the town that doesn't have any busing whatsoever, their per pupil cost is going to be hopefully lower than ours would, oh, no, I'm sorry, okay, I see where you're saying it would
But you
be
can't
equal.
compare.
Because we don't count ours in there.
So they like to count like things in the calculation.
Right, similar things. But it is rather misleading that we only spend 12,000 per student. We're spending 15.
But we're trying to show you in other districts in the neighboring districts in the county around us, using the same standards.
Okay, wanted clarification, thank you.
Sure thing, thanks. I'm sorry. Security and something else. I don't know what the rest is.
Still allowed for comment?
Sure.
Okay. Libby Hilsenrath, Chatham Borough. I just wanted to follow up on what Mrs. Martinson said, just to clarify, I guess, for myself. I guess I understand if a referendum would be a bond issue, and the bond is issued by a municipality, right? It's not issued by a school board, it's issued by a municipality. Is that correct?
The bond is issued by a funding agency.
Okay, well,
But if you're asking us the term issue,
okay.
again,
Maybe I'm mixing up my terms,
it
but...
just makes it difficult to answer. But
Okay.
keep going, we'll get there.
Okay, so the operating budget, those taxes, do we see that on our municipal tax bill, the operating?
The 1.77 that we're discussing?
Yeah.
For next year?
Mhm.
Yes, the answer to that question is yes.
Okay, so that's not financed through any bond or anything, that's just, we pay the tax.
Just tax levy. I'm using the wrong terms, I'm sure, but,
Like when you were talking before about our, I guess it's '05 bond is coming to maturity, right? This year in 2015, is that right? The
it's being
2005?
refinanced, right, Matt?
No.
95's maturing.
95 maturing,
and
05
being
being
refinanced.
financed, yes.
95 is maturing, okay, so that was what, a 20-year bond also? Okay, if that's maturing in 2015, if we were to not issue or ask or put forward another referendum, how would we see the difference in our bottom line taxes, whether it's listed as municipal or however? Do you understand, am I asking the question right?
You are, and basically there would be minimal change, because as Dr. LaSousa said earlier, the way the bond repayments were structured, the 2005 bond was, I guess, backloaded to have a bigger the majority of the payback to offset the 95 bond, the 1995 bond maturing. So rather than burden the debt with heavy payments for the 10 years where the bonds overlap, they kind of backloaded the payments of the 2005 bond. So the payments will approximately be the same based on the financial advisors and payment schedule.
Backloading mean paying more
Backloading
towards
meaning
the end of
while
the
you-
maturity?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, but it's still going to mature in 2015. Like-
It would have if the district did not refund the bond to get a lower interest rate, or if, to put it in a more common term, if the district did not refinance the bonds in order to take advantage of a better interest rates.
All right, I guess I'm getting confused between the 3.8 million savings on refinancing of 98, 99 versus maturity of, because there's two separate bonds. One is being refinanced to save money, and one is coming to maturity, right?
Correct.
Okay, which one was backloaded again?
The 2005 bond is being
2005.
refinanced in order to get the savings.
Okay, and again, just so I understand, if, I know this is not supposed to be about the referendum, but I think people are unclear. If the referendum were not to pass, would we see a bottom line change in our total tax impact? Starting
Depending
in
on the
20,
relative changes in other taxes that are part of your tax bill.
pardon me?
Depending on the relative changes of the other components of your tax bill, which includes the county tax, the municipal
Right.
tax, the education budget, et cetera.
Right,
Would you
right.
see an absolute
Those,
reduction in your tax bill? Not necessarily. It all depends on what's happening. There are many variables that are involved.
But in regards to the school, don't mix apples and oranges, Mr. Belvin. Would we ever see like a minus, a savings, and then the plus, the new? Would we ever see the old and the new, or it just gets lumped together so you really can't figure out what you're paying?
We are not trying to mix apples and oranges. As we've said, we don't control that money. That money gets allocated by the borough and the township. So it's up to what the borough and township choose to do with the lesser amounts that they're going to pay. Because this money that pays back the bonds is part of the borough and the township's full operating budget. When the vote, as I said before, when the voters approve it, that money that repayment schedule becomes part of the borough and the township's budget. So they have to account for that money when they do their annual budgets. So we can't say what will happen because we don't control those entities.
So who saves all that money and backloaded it? I mean, whose job was it to do that?
That is the financial advisor's job, so that you don't have heavy tax impacts on both the borough and the township, and that does get sent to the borough and the township for approval.
Okay, and they do that, not you guys, you're out of that.
I don't know if you could say we're fully out of it, but we hired the financial advisor to go into the bonding process and take those results and convey them to our two counterparts in the borough and the township.
And then you take the advice of the Board of Ed on those things.
In most cases, yes, they work with it and see the reasonableness. They take the advice of the financial advisor and the Board of Ed, and they can review them with their attorneys, their auditors, or their financial staff.
Just one last quick question then. I'm not sure, again, I fully understand it, but if the township and the borough are taking on the financial burden of a bond repayment, right? I think you guys present this budget and/or referendum to them in the next coming weeks, correct? Do they vote, do they vote to approve or not approve it? Or, I mean, do they just say, yes, we'll take this additional $25 million debt on, or? Does that make sense?
They follow what the taxpayers vote. So as far as your borough and township committee members, obviously, how they individually vote, which no one knows, determines whether they agree to or not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Are there additional questions on the, if we can, try and stick to the budget, because we have another meeting after this? If not, we're going to close, oops, sorry. If not, we're going to close this session, just recess for about 10 minutes, and then reconvene for the public Board of Ed meeting. So we'll see you back here in about 10, 15 minutes. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Tom. We're going to call the public meeting to order. Just a few housekeeping items. In accordance with the requirements of the Open Public Meeting Act, Chapter 231, PL 1975 announcement, I wish to announce that the New Jersey Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right to the public to have advance notice and to attend the meetings of public bodies at which business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this act, the school districts of the Chathams, the Board of Education, has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, place thereof posted in the Board Administrative Offices, sent to the clerks of the Chatham Township and the Chatham Borough, the Library of the Chathams, the Chatham Courier, the Daily Record, the Star Ledger, and the Independent Press. Mr. DeQuilla, could you please do roll call?
Mr. Gilfillan. Here. Mr. Belvin.
Here?
Ms. Clark.
Here.
Mr. Connors. Ms. Cronin.
Here.
Mr. Franz. Here. Ms. Kenny.
Here.
Mr. Longmaker.
Here.
And Ms. Webb.
Here, thank you.
Eight present and accounted for.
Excellent, thank you. Would everybody please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? Just to throw everybody off, we've moved the flag to the right side here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Appreciate that. We're going to start off with Dr. LaSousa with the administrative reports.
Thank you, Ms. Weber. I have two items. In a second, I'll call up Dr. Vindalia to talk about our HIB report that we're required to give twice a year at a public meeting. First, though, I just, since I've been talking about it last few meetings, we're off to the races with park testing, despite a week of rough weather last week. So as of today, ending, we have delivered park in every school in the district. Today we had third graders going for the first time, and overall that went pretty well. As you probably know, if you've been reading, park has been a source of all kinds of emotions across the state, and there have been widely varying rates of participation in schools, especially high schools across the state. So we haven't been immune to having to grapple with some of that, and it's taken a massive amount of time from some of our administrative staff, and of course all of our teachers have been trained on how to deliver the new test. So as of today, I think we're faring well, and we're moving along, and our technology has held up well. Our students have been fine by and large. And it's just been a little bit of a time drain over the past week. And like I said, the weather hasn't assisted us too much. So if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them. Karen has been in the buildings. Really, she hasn't even been in her office practically the past 7 days. So we're happy to take any questions if you're curious about anything relative to park testing.
I have just what's the next set of park grades to be tested? Sorry, Karen.
Oh, tomorrow, grade 3 will continue in the assessments. Grade 7 is going to be starting to test, and then the sophomores,
Okay.
and obviously grade 5.
And the group in April, back through the same grades, or is it a different?
Oh, it's all grades. It's grades 3 through 11 ELA, and then grades 3 through 8 math, and then algebra 1, algebra 2, and geometry.
Right, but I'm sorry, the session in April. There's
The EOI, are you talking about the second?
the second,
So every grade goes again.
oh yeah, I knew that. When does at what point, what's the dates for the next set of testing?
I don't have those on
Okay,
right now.
but-
Different schools are using different dates.
Before or after our break?
Oh, after our spring break,
Okay, end of April then.
yes.
Yeah, between spring break and Memorial Day.
Thanks, that narrows it.
Right when AP testing happens,
Excellent.
which we told the state would be difficult for districts like us.
I'm sure they knew when the AP testing was.
Sorry about that, Ms. Weber.
No,
I'll park 'em.
we'll get it together. You're parked out, I'm with you. Very good. Mr. DeQuilla for the business administrative report?
Well, let me just jump to item
I'm
number
sorry.
2 really quickly. I'm going to call up Dr. Vindalia, who's our Assistant Superintendent for Student Support Programs, and he'll just give a brief version of HIB investigation summaries to date. The lengthier report, we've moved to the end of the year so that we can do all the discipline in the district and the year of HIB review in April or May. We're planning that.
Oh, thank you. I didn't mean to cut
You're
you off,
welcome.
and I certainly wouldn't have cut Dr. DeLeo.
Hello.
No
good evening.
problem.
So as part of the Anti-Bullying Bill of Rights Act, we're required to report to the board twice a year on the number of investigations and the outcome of those investigations for harassment, intimidation, and bullying. So I'd like to give you that report from the period of July 1, 2014 through January 31, 2015. So at the Southern Boulevard School and the Milton Avenue School, there were no investigations of HIB and no findings of HIB, harassment, intimidation, and bullying, the acronym HIB. At the Washington Avenue School, we had one investigation, and HIB was not corroborated in that investigation. At Lafayette, we had 3 investigations. One of those was corroborated as an incident of harassment, intimidation, or bullying. At the middle school, we had 13 investigations, 7 of which were found to be incidents of HIB. And at the high school, we had 6, with 2 of those being corroborated as HIB.
And Milton Avenue, did you say that and I missed it?
None at Milton, none at
Oh,
Southern.
none at Milton, none at Southern, thank you. And those numbers are down from last year? Yes, I'm sorry.
I don't have that comparison
I
for
do.
this year.
They're close to the
They're
tracking,
close,
though. I
but-
mean, halfway point,
They're
yeah,
close.
close to tracking. And I think last year as well, I think every year since the law's been in place, our middle school numbers have been the highest, followed by the high school, and then very few at the elementary level.
Mrs. Kenny?
In terms of the issues that are taking place with the students? Mic on, please, thanks. Do you,
Do you see any themes that are taking place at each of the schools, maybe at the high school and the middle school, that we could address?
Most of the trends tend to be name calling with regard to ethnicity, or that seems to be the predominant trend
In
that we
person or
see.
social media?
Both, mostly in person. We've
Okay.
had about 2 cases where it was a cyber issue.
Okay.
Would you say that, I know that some of this data is, when you look at districts like Chatham, are we falling within the range of districts like, I know we have to look at size and the number of students and how many, the population of schools, but are we consistent? Are we high
We
or
have to
low?
compile that information, and we do report that information to the state.
Okay.
I'm not sure at this point if they are putting that together
Okay.
for public review,
Okay.
but we do report the same information to the state.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
Any other questions? Thank you, Dr. DeLeo.
Thank you all.
Thanks, pleasure to see you again.
I have nothing to report.
Wow. I waited all that time. Thank you very much. We're going to move on to committee reports.
Did we have a ribbon cutting?
I'm sorry?
Did the high school open? Is it fully open?
Oh, yeah, he reported on that already.
The wing is open.
That was reported last.
I was here last week, but it said
I did note that,
they didn't know
CO.
if there was like a ribbon cutting or anything.
I did note that last week, but to confirm the high school construction phase 2, the TCO was issued the end of February. The district has cleaned and made the rooms available to the high school. Right now, I think the high school is going to use them for temporary overflows for the park testing, but I can't, say that that actually happened to them.
Okay, thank you. If you have any questions, you can actually go back and watch the videotape.
I was here too.
Moving on to committee reports. Ms. Kenny, we're going to start with personnel.
Personnel has not met since our last meeting.
Very good, thank you. Curriculum, Ms. Cronin.
We have not met, we are meeting this Wednesday.
Policy and planning, Mr. Belding.
Policy and planning, same thing, has not met. I think there's a meeting this Wednesday, 6:30.
Okay, very good. Finance and facilities has met several times. So, Mr. Gilfillan? Oh, did you want to start with this, and then I'll swing into the...
Microphone.
One thing I did want to clarify and expand upon what Mike had said previously to a series of questions regarding that if a referendum was to either not pass or we had for some reason decided not to move forward with it, The average savings, I'm using figures, and I wanted to confirm these, from the township basis would be an annual savings of $35 per household. And due to the fact that I missed the meeting on Wednesday of last week, Ms. Weber will give us an update. Hopefully, it's not a music update.
Not a music update. It'll probably be shorter than my music update. So the Finance and Facility Committee met on March 2nd. I filled in for Mr. Gilfillan as he was not available. We talked about all the feedback from the various public sessions that have been held over the last 6-8 weeks rather, and then covered the recent feedback from the meeting from last Saturday. Went back over the pros and cons and the rationale, and we have taken into a bunch of things into consideration. And Dr. LaSusa, would you mind bringing up the, it might be the second to last slide, the cost per pupil? And before we go with the recommendation from the Finance Committee to the full board to get their say on the finance, the guiding principle, I've been in the district 15 years. The guiding principle has always been maximum results, minimal tax impact. So in this instance, we're spending $12,000, almost $13,000 per pupil. So in order to achieve the results on the right, we have spent the least amount as possible without compromising performance. And a few people have written articles and even said in some of the public sessions, why don't you be more like Milburn? Why can't you be more like Summit? And if we were to be more like Milburn, with a difference of, just on the slide, about $1,600 in cost per pupil, that would give us an increase of about $6.8 million to our operating budget. And let's just say it was just 1,000. Let's just go with a round number of 1,000. With 4,100 students in the district, 4,136 students in the district, that's a $4 million operating bump. So even if we just increased our cost per pupil, because some people argue you don't always want to be the cheapest, because then what are you giving up on the performance side? But this has been a balancing act, and not one that started today or yesterday. It's one that started years and decades ago, to be efficient and yet get as much maximum performance on the right-hand side for our students and the most value for our taxpayers. Some would also say, well, our property values are impacted by the school district. And one gentleman, I think on Saturday, said, well, is it the school system? Is it the train line, direct to Midtown? Well, some of these other schools are on the train line as well, spending more per pupil and not necessarily seeing the same test results or success rates and enrollment rates in post-secondary going beyond. So the guiding principle has always been maximum results, minimal cost to taxpayers, hopefully benefiting the most number of students, the most number of taxpayers, property tax, making Chatham a desirable place to live, to work, to raise children, to retire, to move here at retirement in some instances. So again, when we compare towns to towns, and some of these towns have significantly higher taxes than Chatham, again, even a $1,000 bump in a cost per pupil would be an extra $4 million to our operating budget, which would be a permanent impact to the tax. That's not the case here. We always stay as low as we possibly can while maintaining performance. Now, with that all being said, the guidance, Mike, are you able to switch to the next slide? With that guiding principle in mind, I just wanted to bring up, in 2005, the referendum yielded close to a little over $26 million. So in order to take every opportunity of the current finances and the current state relief and the interest rates that are currently being offered, so the $26 million in 2005 cost the borough $71 for $100,000 of assessed value, and the township $57. Conversely, the 2015 referendum that we're considering in April, for the entire package of just under $25 million, the 24.8, so for the same general dollar amount, it's only $25 in the borough and $25 in the township. Again, taking advantage of every opportunity, the lower interest rates, the refunds and the state debt service, or not the debt service, but the refunds that we get for some of these projects that will be financed through the referendum. If you finance certain things through operating budget, we do not qualify. And I think it's about $2.9 million, is that true? $2.9 million of state assistance that we're getting, packaging it this way. So between the low interest rates and the state aid, the net figure to the borough is $25 per 100,000 and $25 to the township per 100,000 for this current referendum. And I just wanted to make that comparison to the 2005 referendum, which passed for 26 million. Now, again, with that all being said, the Finance Committee met, took everything into consideration, and to get the maximum value out of all of our dollars and achieve the same high results, we've decided to keep this as one question, put the question out there for these projects for the $24.8 million in the April vote. So we've taken everything into consideration, and this is a comprehensive package to benefit the most number of students, the most number of residents, and that's the recommendation of the Finance Committee. Now, everybody on the board was not present, so I'm going to ask those that wish to speak and those that weren't there. Several of us were there, so they may be a little bit more brief, but I'm going to go to my left with Mr. Belding as our elder statesman, the longest member of our board currently here. To give Lotta a break, because usually I pick on Lotta to go first, so I'm going to go to my left down to Lotta, and then Mr. Nonamaker, I'm going to swing back to you, and then end up right here with Mr. Gilfillan. So again, the recommendation of the Finance Committee from our previous meetings to go with one question for the full project. Mr. Belding?
Thank you, Ms. Weber. So I'd like to just comment on some of the feedback that we got in the public sessions, and these are just general observations. Now, my background is in management and economics and finance. I have spent a fair amount of time connected with schools, and I've worked on budgets and referendums in between Milburn and Chatham. I was on a board in Milburn twice. So anyway, my first comment has to do with inflation. Nobody has really mentioned inflation except the fact that why have my taxes gone up and up and up? Chatham schools are affected by inflation just like the rest of us. Several folks have mentioned how their taxes have increased. Probably the single biggest factor in why your taxes have gone up over any period of time, frankly, has been inflation. If you look on the Bureau of Labor Statistics website, which is, you can Google CPI inflation calculator, you'll find that the impact of inflation has been to increase overall prices nearly double since 1990. You may find this surprising. This means that groceries, doctor bills, housing, transportation, on average, have nearly doubled. School costs are affected by inflation also. We have to buy our supplies, we have to pay for medical insurance for our staff, we have to do all the same things that you do when you run a household, except we live in a much more complex environment in some respects. Anyway, let's not single out the schools as though they were responsible for a general economic trend or divert from a realistic assessment of what is being proposed. At the same time, we have experienced a 91% increase in enrollment. We had 2,169 students in 1990. We now have 4,138. We're budgeting for 4,200 for next year. Imagine if your family had nearly doubled in size. How would that have increased your expenses? Keep in mind that during that time, you also had to accommodate numerous new and expensive regulations, multiple upgrades in technology platforms, and the maintenance of aging facilities. Of course, our costs have gone up, but they haven't gone up anywhere as close to what they would have if it was a linear progression. Inflation 2 times, enrollment 2 times. It could have been 4 times. I don't think our costs have gone up 4 times since 1990. Despite the above, as numerous people have pointed out, Chatham has come out on top in performance and near the bottom in cost per student. The Board of Ed and the administration have done a yeoman's job of delivering great product at a reasonable price. We've held costs down and delivered, together with the consistent support of the community, tremendous value. This is reflected in our consistently high property values and the overall quality of our community and the people in it, something we all benefit from. I believe, and I think most of my fellow board members feel similarly, that the proposed referendum is the most efficient way to meet numerous necessary needs, not wants. And the time is right to do this. Interest rates will never be lower than they are right now. To delay will add needless expense to the community. There is no better alternative. Looking within the overall project list, the new auditorium is the best solution to meet the needs of our performing arts, but also for freeing up much-needed space for additional classrooms, for STEM, and other purposes. Any other solution, expanding on the existing middle school structure, up or out, would require taking at least part of an intensely used facility offline with major program disruption, or impinging on other space such as athletic fields, which are in short supply and also intensely used. A new auditorium in a location we already own, unencumbered, the construction of which will not disrupt existing programs, and which can meet the needs of the community, is the best choice. Several folks commented on why theaters in New York City have not upgraded. If they can live with old, why can't we? After all, it's the people, not the space, that matters. We don't challenge that later thought. But, well, I'm not an expert on the theater business, but let's look at the basic business proposition. Theaters in New York City are profit-making enterprises. To upgrade their facilities would involve, particularly in New York, extraordinary expense and loss of revenue during renovation, in a business that is normally under intense pressure to control expense and risk. It would also involve making the theaters ADA compliant, just like we're having to face with our auditoriums, which would in all likelihood reduce their seating capacity and thus further constrain revenues and profits. These facilities are also in most cases completely space constrained. In Chatham, we have some flexibility, tangible needs in vital programs, and a great opportunity that will not last. We should take advantage of it. We are at the right price point, and even after the referendum, we will still be well below the price per student of our nearest qualitative rivals. The referendum we're proposing is the best solution for the community. The Board of Ed and the administration have not suddenly become spendthrift. We have been, and I'm confident will continue to be, diligent watchdogs of the public interest. This is what you elected us to do. Our track record suggests that we have earned your trust. There are times when the right thing to do is spend money and invest in the community and its future. We think this is one of those times. We hope to have your support.
Thank you, Mr. Belding. Moving down to Mr. Franz.
I don't have anything prepared like the senior statesman, Mr. Belding, but it doesn't mean I haven't thought any less about this since it came up. I've certainly spoken and encouraged comments from friends, neighbors, whether at the train station, in the neighborhood, at a sporting event, at King's, at Stop and Shop, wherever I may be. Comment, opinion is what this is all about. And I think everyone, for better or worse, needs to look at this from every different angle before they make their own decision. And at the end of the day, it is everyone's own decision. I was elected as an official, which I still find funny at times to this day. But part of that election was people entrusting me to make good decisions, use fair judgment, of which, I've taken very seriously when it comes to this. I could, and I still can't hit a curveball. I can't sing. I was a less than dedicated student. But I think at the end of the day, we have to do what's best for the children and the students. And I think all things considered and all things up for the vote, of which you all will be able to make your own decision. It's not on us. I think those all make for a very strong argument for them all to be included, in that they represent the whole student body. And for that reason, I'm on board with one question.
Thank you, Phil. Ms. Clark?
I'm the newest board member on here, and I've, sat in many meetings about this. But prior to me sitting here, I spent many meetings sitting out there. And the issues that have come before the board, these are not new issues. These have come forth with, capital improvements needs. What I have found is that this board we've gone over this so many times. We as a board have talked through issues that we've listened to you, we've gone back, we've talked, and, I personally have, just like Mr. Franz, I have talked to many people, whether it's in my children's school, whether it's in my neighborhood, but it feels like everywhere I go, I'm talking about this, and I too feel that we have to keep this in one question. I feel that it has to be one question because just like the base budget, I look at it that, I may not have children, or not every child benefits from every single thing in the budget, but we still put it all together because we're serving the whole community of learners in our schools. And when we look at this referendum, by breaking it apart, I feel like it would pit one program against another, or, in my sentiment, it would create a bad vibe that would not be conducive to what we set out. I think it should stay as one question. I think everybody's entitled to their opinion. I encourage people to go vote and express their opinion at the polls. We've extended the hours at the polls to allow more people to have that opportunity. Hopefully we will have a higher turnout and that people will have the chance to express their desires and hopefully, make their own informed decisions. So I support it as staying one decision, and I appreciate the endless hours the Finance and Facilities Committee has put toward this referendum. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kenny?
I'd like to first of all thank the public for coming out and expressing their opinion. I found that very helpful. I think that that being said, I think that all the projects are equally important, and I think that the referendum positions us to make the improvements that the district needs in the most cost-effective manner, and therefore I support the referendum as it's being presented as one question.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Kenny. I'm going to flip to the other side. Mr. Nonamaker?
Yes, I too would like to thank the public. One of the things that occurred during the public sessions was people would come to the microphone and they would say, I want to thank you for the job that you do. Not to me, to all of us. And the respect that people had for us and how we work, how we volunteer our time. And more than any other decision that I had to participate in, no matter what I did, no matter how I cast a vote, there was going to be a certain portion of the population that was going to be disappointed. So when I say to you, I support the Finance Committee's decision to leave it as one question, I don't want you to think that that was an easy thing. It required a lot of work. It required a lot of sleepless nights. It required a lot of tugging and pulling and spending time listening to the public. When I consider everything that I know about the referendum and how it's going to enrich Chatham, and I look at the alternatives, I feel that the only way that I could act in the best interests of Chatham, and I've gone through all of them, all the alternatives. There was an alternative to break it down into 3, which I thought was a fantastic idea. And then a large percentage of the population wanted each question to stand on its own. And I looked at that, and I considered that, and I talked to other people, and I listened to my colleagues. And after all the hard work, after all the listening, after all the pushing and tugging and sleepless nights, I have decided to endorse and to support the Finance Committee's decision to put this as one question. And I thank you for your input, and I hope for your support.
Thank you, Mr. Nonamaker. Ms. Cronin?
I just wrote up something since I've been part of this for a long time. We have spent many days and hours looking into the best solution to address the growth in enrollment and curriculum. We have not heard one idea that we did not explore. Originally, I was a no on the new building, and I was a yes on multiple questions. And believe me, I fought very hard with my committee members, and I think as a result, it was many, many hours and many days, but I think because of those discussions, We really batted this out, and we went through things like unbelievable. And I'm a finance person by background, 30 years on Wall Street, and I'm big on the numbers. And what it comes down to, and is that we have right now 997 students in CMS that are sharing one STEM classroom, okay? We have fought really hard to expand the curriculum. I think that, Karen Chase and the administration have done a tremendous job in offering the new curriculum that we have, the whole STEM program. And we now have this great program, and we have to turn kids away who are trying to register to get into these classes. These are phenomenal classes, great opportunities for our students, opening their minds and brains to new opportunities. And to me, my big turning point is we don't have the classrooms. So now, we don't have the classrooms, we can fit a certain amount of kids into these classes, but unless we do this extension, well, we can't extend it CMS. The new STEM classrooms are going to be built where the current auditorium is. So I support the one question, because to me, it's the only way that we can, and, we've, like I said, we've gone through this and we've proved this, through all the work that we've done, that to really extend, to add the classrooms, especially like for CMS, we have to use the existing space that we have at the auditorium, and we have to add a new building. So I support the one question.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Cronin. Rounding out with our illustrious leader of the Finance Committee, Mr. Gilfillan.
When we went into this whole process 3 years ago, 3+ years ago, the absolute focus of what we were looking at was addressing the massive inadequacies of our arts facilities. We looked at all different kinds of funding, off-balance sheet funding, whatever you want to call it, to try to address the needs of the arts. We had done that due to the fact that we had felt over the years prior to that we had addressed a number of the needs in terms of the athletic facilities, as well as classrooms through past referendums, as well as working within the operating budget to add significant amount of classrooms at the high school to deal with the increased enrollment. We didn't have basically at that point any intent on doing anything outside of the arts. We didn't move into this and looking at Cougar Field or looking at additional classroom spaces. From a perspective of a single vote, and when people asked us to strip them out and do all of the basically 3 verticals, I couldn't get myself to do that for one reason, because deep in my heart, I couldn't have gone into this with the absolute intent of addressing the needs for the arts and coming out with additional classrooms or additional athletic facilities only, and not being a part, not having the arts addressed. I just couldn't do that. At that point, we had always had, and you guys will have to know that we have pushed back the administration for years and years and years in terms of looking at a referendum. When we went forward with that and we gave the okay to even entertain the option of a referendum, we did have a dollar figure in our head that we would be comfortable with in terms of asking for the public to reach into their pockets. And we've asked, and as we've always said, we're going to have 2 budgets going forward. One, which is to keep the lights on, and then 2, ask the public to support second questions for additional options and optionality or programs within the district. So when the dollar figures came back, at that point, with what we had felt was, or I had felt was fair in terms of asking of the public versus what we have seen through second questions over the last 2 years and other years, is that I decided, should we look at addressing all of the needs that are currently deemed inadequate or areas of need within the district. So with this referendum and the pending ESIP program, we're going to be able to address a massive amount of the needs that we have here from a facility perspective within the district at a dollar figure that I feel is not asking too much. Now, if you look at it from a perspective, you say, well, what does that mean? If you look at what we're asking for this year, when you combine the 1.77% and the referendum, we are not asking for, in all honesty, much more than we asked for last year, and that vote passed 72 to 28. So, with the fact that I believe from a financial perspective, from a perspective of being in a position to upgrade all of the needs within the district through numerous options here, I do believe a single question is the right way to go. I think it's been done in a very fiscally responsible way. I can guarantee you that while I will not say next year will be a 1.77%, I guarantee you we will keep that figure down as low as possible. I do believe from a perspective that if this referendum passes, combined with the ESIP program, is that we will focus on maintaining a extremely low operating budget moving forward as we digest this whole process. However, in the end, I don't think we are being fiscally irresponsible in any way. So with that, I am throwing my support behind the single question and the referendum as a whole.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Gilfillan. Assuming there's no additional questions on the Finance Committee report, we will move on to liaison reports. Mr. Connor is not able to report out for the borough, so moving on to Chatham Township, Ms. Clark.
Nothing to report from the township.
Very good. I would have passed it back to Mr. Connors for the athletic boosters, but I'll just speak for him. They have not met since our last meeting, but they are meeting tomorrow night at the Chatham High School Media Center. I believe at 7 o'clock is when they begin. The next report is mine for the Chatham Music Theater Boosters. So on February 28th, the Chatham Music Theater Boosters held their annual breakfast with the musicians, so grades 5 through 8, the bands, and the 7th and 8th grade orchestra, the Chatham Middle School and the Chatham High School singers, and also the cast of Once Upon a Mattress entertained the large crowds throughout the morning in a sort of open house format with breakfast with the musicians. The Chatham High School musical was this past weekend. Once Upon a Mattress was performed to a near sellout crowd. It was Wednesday night started off with the senior dinner, so that drew large crowds. After the performance, the senior citizens were served dinner by the National Honor Society, and then the cast mingled and met some of the senior citizens who were able to attend the play. And the dinner is paid for by a grant through the NJEA Pride grant. So thank you for the grant. And congratulations to all the students and the cast and the crew and all the volunteers that put in painful amounts of hours in spite of all the lost rehearsal time with the snow dates. They used their technology well to Skype and FaceTime to do some of the rehearsals, some of the scenes they had together that were more intricate. So congratulations, they forged ahead and they put on a fantastic show. And 8 middle school singers and 1 violinist represented Chatham in a recent performance with the Junior Regional Chorus and Orchestra. That's sponsored through the New Jersey School Music Association. And finally, wrapping up, Dr. Klemp and the Chatham Music Theater Boosters are getting ready for the annual Festival of Music, which is sponsored here at the high school, and the proceeds from that directly go back into the music program to offset travel costs for the musicians that travel out of state. So for the last 2 years, it will offset the cost $100 per pupil. It will reduce the travel cost. So those proceeds, a lot of hard work for Dr. Klemp and her staff and the parent volunteers. So just wanted to say thank you to them. Moving on, it was shorter. Chatham Education Foundation, Ms. Kenny? Okay, thank you. Recreation, Mr. Nonamaker?
We are meeting tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night, very good, thank you. Is that a closed meeting or an open meeting?
It's open.
Open, very good. Where do you meet?
We meet at the Borough
Oh, very good, thank you.
on the 2nd floor.
Down the hall to the left.
Exactly.
PTO District Cabinet, Ms. Cronin?
Yes, we did meet. The majority of the meeting was about the park testing and the referendum. Nothing, though.
Was there feedback from the PTO members on park or not? It was too early.
It was before, I think we had actually started the testing. Yeah, we had.
Nothing that
There was nothing that really, sorry.
Nothing that we haven't
No, nothing that we
covered already?
haven't, right, talked about, unless you disagree. And the referendum, they gave us, I think the same feedback we've been, kind of hearing, so.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for those reports. I would like to make a motion to pass the minutes of the February 23rd public session and the February 28th public session, which was the special meeting that we held last Saturday regarding the referendum.
I'll second the motions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. DeQuilla, could you do a roll call on that? Roll call vote?
February 23rd, Mr. Gilfillan.
Yes.
Mr. Belding.
Yes.
Ms. Clark.
Yes.
Ms. Cronin.
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
Ms. Kenny.
Yes.
Mr. Nottingham.
Yes.
Ms. Weber.
Yes. Yes,
February 28th, Mr. Gilfillan.
the 28th.
Yes, okay, sorry.
Mr. Belding.
Yes.
Ms. Clark.
Abstain.
Ms. Cronin.
Yes. Oh, wait, was that the public meeting?
Yeah,
Oh, I
you
wasn't at the public meeting.
Mr. Francis.
No, I wasn't, I was at the
Yes. Ms. Kenny.
Yes.
Mr. Nottingham.
Yes.
And Ms. Weber.
Yes, thank you very much.
602.
Fantastic. So we're at the portion of our program. We have our first opportunity for public commentary. If you can be as brief as possible, I'm sure there's going to be a number of neighbors and folks to get up. So if you could line up so we can gauge how many people are going to speak. If you can, keep it to 2 minutes or so. Just be very mindful and respectful of your neighbors behind you. And if you would step up to the mic, sign in, introduce yourself, where you live. Mr. Belding's going to help me with the timing.
Good evening, Len Resto, Chatham Borough. Would like to thank you for allowing us the opportunity this evening to speak, and also for the sessions that you've had over the past couple of weeks and months to allow us to provide the input. And no doubt it was a very difficult decision, and I'm sure that you did spend many a sleepless night. However, that being said, we are disappointed at the decision because American servicemen and women have died for the right for Americans to have choice, and that has been denied to us. So for me, it's really a sad day for Chatham when the Board of Ed really abrogates its fiduciary duty to the voters of the district by denying them the democratic right of choice. It's unconscionable that the Board of Ed would throw the average taxpayer under the bus by making them feel guilty and conflicted, as Helena Axelrod so aptly pointed out on February 28th, by casting a no vote because they are opposed to a building that they don't want to see, that they feel it's not needed. So the taxpayers of the district will provide their answer on April 21st. They will vote as they see fit, and I would recommend a strong no vote for the budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Nabil Moulin, Chatham Township. I had a question about the STEM classes that are discussed. I agree with Mrs. Cronin that the school and the community has done a great job bringing all those programs, and I concur with the administration that those kids need space. I've been to the middle school recently, and there are a few parts of the building that are just one floor. Would have been that an option to build classrooms on top of all those spaces that are just one floor? When you face the building, like I don't know, it's east or west, that's only one floor. On the back, there are a bunch of areas that's only one floor. I'm just asking, just in case the referendum doesn't pass and that need will remain. Those kids need classrooms, as you say. Will we have a chance to, if the community and the board supports that, to have another construction project, maybe in September, to allow those classrooms to be built on that configuration somewhere else in the middle school?
There is one wing in particular that's one floor. So if you were to walk down kind of from the main entrance of the middle school toward the auditorium, there are three hallways, and two of them have second stories, one does not. The biggest drawback to considering that is that you lose the classrooms on the first floor while you construct on the second floor. And as Mr. Belding pointed out, when we looked at all of the options and what we just went through with at the high school, that is not an optimal option for us to take out 6 or 8 classrooms while we build and kind of disrupt the students that are in the facility now.
How about above the administration? That's, when you face the entrance on the left, the whole L is just that it's not classrooms, it's administration. Would that have been an option?
Any place where there's only one story is an option. In
Okay.
speaking with architects, there are some options that rise to a more optimal possibility.
Thank you.
Jane Devlin, Chatham Township. Before I begin, may I ask, am I allowed to talk about something else other than? I am, so it's not just, tonight isn't just exclusive referendum. Okay, it is, not just, no, it is not just exclusive referendum. Okay, because I didn't want to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Thank you.
Whatever you'd like to address.
Okay. Well, a lot of everyone's focus has been the referendum, which I do support in full and thank the board for all its efforts. I feel our choice and democratic right is intact through our right to vote yea or nay at the polls. However, I urge other issues not be placed on sidelines, and with that, continue to request the district explore, assess, evaluate, and possibly revise if and how homework is best serving students' needs. This is in follow-up to the compilation of points I have made at near each board meeting from September to now. I would like to ask what level of confidence this concern is being addressed by the district and the board, and if not, then what further can be done to facilitate this process, or in other words, get the ball rolling. Lastly, I would like to respectfully point out that during Park, homework was not assigned. That was despite Park not being held all day, and what I mean is classes were still in session. So I would postulate that at least one objective for a homework-free zone was to have the students be rested, relaxed, decrease added stresses, be optimistic and at ease during Park. Well, if that was recognized as being desirable or advantageous, if not optimal for students during Park, then I would question why wouldn't we want our youth to feel as rested and stress-free as possible during every day of their student experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Devlin.
Richard Reardon, live in Chatham Borough. The only reason I'm here is I wanted to thank the board because I realize how, difficult it is to come up with it and make it the final decision of this kind and nature and the work that you all put in. Having said that, I would like to say, I looked at the brochure on the 28th and they talked about $100,000 savings. It's $100,000 savings maybe to me in the borough, but it's not to the township. I mean, it's paying from one pocket to the other. So I really look upon that really as not a true savings to be publicized. With respect to the other aspects, I know you went through what we're seeing as the final solution, so to speak. There must have been a thought of just building the 6 robotic classes, if I'm not mistaken, and also refurbishing the middle school, which I keep thinking of as the high school auditorium. That really was built as a professional theater, had the input from the Chatham players and everything else. I think it has great bones, but that's my opinion. So I realize everybody thought about that, but I question, but a decision has been made. And I would have said this on the 28th, but I was a little slow on getting up. I was a little faster tonight. But I do want to thank you, even though I may have second thoughts about building a professional theater. Because again, there's certain things I don't think public entities should get into. And I heard about, well, we'll rent it out, we'll rent it out. I don't know if many of the people realize, I built a skating rink, ice skating rink off of Columbia Pike. It's now a church because Menon came in and the county built Menon and he couldn't compete. So, I mean, that's something I really question, the public, competing with the private sector. And on that same note, because I heard it tonight, I realize we get a good bang for our buck, and I thank the board for that. But with respect to the fact, when you figure out how much it costs to, to teach a pupil, I think the entire budget comes into play. Maybe not with respect to comparisons, but speaking as a former member of the Board of Ed, which didn't have busing, and the township had busing, we knew when the consolidation was going to come, the regionalization,
If you
we were
could
going to pick
summarize,
up
I'd
busing.
appreciate it.
And that was an expense we didn't have. So I'm just saying, and also being in the private sector, when I pay somebody a salary,
If
I
you could
take
sum up, I would appreciate that. If
I'm
you could
sorry?
I'm sorry, if you could sum up.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you. I apologize.
No, if I've extended, I thank you for the time.
No, thank you very much for coming out. I'm sorry we missed you on the 28th. I wanted to make it at noon.
I was slow.
Hi, I'm Jen Clark, Chatham Borough. I just wanted to thank the board for all the time and effort you've put in evaluating the referendum. I appreciate the unanimous vote that each of you expressed, choosing to make it one question, and the time and thought you put in responding in your answers. Mr. Belding, I especially appreciate your response. I think you also brought up some points and made sense and made things clearer to the public, and I really hope the public takes into consideration as much of the content that has been presented over the last 8 weeks in making their decision. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Joyce Martinson from the borough. I just felt impelled to come up and say that, when you're throwing around thank yous, great to the board, but, you should really be thanking all the parents in Chatham who are such great parents to their students. You talk about $12,000 a student a year. You're still using that $12,000, just like that gentleman said, you're using that $12,000 when you're talking about our real budget on the upside. So, the real numbers should have been used when you're talking about how much it cost us for a kid here. And I wouldn't think that most of the parents, they go along with extra tutoring, they go along with extra testing preparation. We're number one because we have great teachers and we have great schools, but we have great parents who spend time and a lot of money to make number one Chatham. That goes into it too. So I really just feel like I have to say that Chatham's parents deserve a thank you also. And I just really feel it is apples and oranges when talk about the real number. It's more like 15,000 with the busing and all the added expenses. And, I think you just have to be fair with the public, and I really don't think you are fair. I'm very, very disappointed. Like Mr. Resto said, this is a democracy. We should have a choice. And talk about inflation. If you don't spend the money, you're not going to have that. It's not going to be there. So, I'm just that we don't need the PAC. I don't think we need the PAC. I think, and shame on all of you for letting the auditoriums get to the situation that they're in. And speaking of that, where's the referendum for cafeterias? And where's the referendum for maybe a better gym or a swimming pool for the swim team or, a skating rink for the hockey team? What about those arts? It just, I don't buy it. I really don't buy it. I'm very disappointed.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Stuart Carr, 3 Crestwood Drive in Chatham, New Jersey. A couple things. One, Mr. Resto mentioned that we're not interested in voting yes on the budget. I did check with him. That's strictly on the referendum component. I agree with the budget. He also, I just checked with him, agreed that the budget itself is not the issue. He meant to say the referendum component of the proposed activity in April, to be clear on that. Again, I believe that we should have, again, the multiple question issue, but so be it. We'll vote in April, and again, I do appreciate everybody taking the time. A couple of nuts and bolts items. One on the turf fields behind the high school. My concern there, as I indicated before, was, again, I think it's a park-like setting. I think there are environmental concerns, potentially. I think there are utilization concerns. I would, again, request that the board have a public meeting for that item at some point in time. I think in particular, unlike the Lum School activity where you have houses across the street for the most part, a couple of exceptions, but generally speaking, across the street, you do have a number of homes, and I'm not one of them, I'm right down the street, but a number of homes right behind the high school that I think just physically in the summertime, the heat coming off the turf, just having the type of activity right literally at your backyard, make sure that all of the neighbors are well aware. I checked with a couple, hadn't heard about that yet. Make sure that the neighbors are aware of what's happening back there. We talk about 60%, 50%, 70%, whatever. But again, it is a park-like setting. I know it's a Board of Ed, but it is also town property. And I think, again, people take that for granted. So with respect to, again, the utilization of the facility, we do have the Cougar Field, we do have Lum, we do have a number of turf fields now. If we do it right with the grass, we can have a terrific field there. Everybody can use it, and I think it would be a resource. It would be superior to the turf. You could spend the same amount of money with the O&M on that. You can, I think, come out ahead, but please do consider that. Final comment is back to Washington Avenue School. Another bugaboo I have is the parking lot that is, I guess, still pretty much on tap pretty soon. I'd like to check and see, again, if we could have some kind of a more formal public hearing on that, because I still think with the nominal diminution in the Washington Avenue School population over the next several years, if we can get through a couple of years, I think that green space there right at Washington Avenue, again, is another community resource. Once that goes to parking lot, albeit convenient, there are potentially some downsides. And I think the kids do get some kind of, I'm not, again, one of the psychologists or whatever these other folks are expert there, but it just seems to me more green is better. And if we can preserve that, we should. Maybe have something like a drive your kid to school day instead of a walk your kid to school day or something or other, kind of turn things around and figure out a way to carpool or use less in the way of automobiles or something. But in any case, on a principal level, see if we can have a hearing for both the turf field in the back and number 2 for Washington Avenue School before that becomes asphalt. And again, while I disagree with the situation here, I do appreciate everybody's time. And again, it was thought out very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carr. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Mr. Carr.
Susan O'Brien, Chatham Township. I just first want to say I'm very disappointed to hear that you're going to position this as one question. As I've been saying to everyone I talk to, this is our right to be able to vote on these issues individually as parents, as a community. So I'm very disappointed in that decision. And with that said, I have a question about the proposal. Is this what is in this document? Is that how you're going to ask the question of the community?
I don't know what you're holding.
The document you issued here, with the proposal.
That's your budget.
That's
The budget. Okay, now, is this how you're going to ask the
The
question?
resolution that's in the agenda is what is required for the legal action. The question that'll be, the question that'll be provided to the voters will not be as lengthy as that.
Okay, because this proposal doesn't mention anything about the construction of a new facility. So if it reads like this,
It won't read like that.
when will we get a chance to see, is it going to include the fact that there will be a new auditorium constructed? That's my question, because when you read this, it says additions and renovations, and it's very unclear. And if people aren't aware of what's going on, they may not know that there's an auditorium being proposed.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mrs. O'Brien.
No, James, you've done once.
Okay, thank you. This is we're going to end our first opportunity for public commentary and move on to board business. There's a second opportunity for board public commentary at the end. So, Ms. Kenny, we're going to start with personnel items.
I would like to move action items A1 through A14.
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion? If you could just give me 1 minute, please. I mean, if you have an extra discussion, carry on. I just need a minute before the vote. Does anybody else have any questions or discussion on the personnel items 1 through 14? Seeing none, Mr. DeQuilla?
Agenda items A1 through A14. Mr. Gilfillan.
I'm going to abstain.
Mr. Beldick. Yes. Ms. Clark.
Yeah.
Ms. Cronin.
2 out.
I didn't realize she disappeared. Sorry. Mr. Franz?
I'm going to abstain as well.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Nonamaker?
Yes.
Ms. Weber?
Yes.
Agenda items passed 502.
I'd like to move action items B1 through, what is that, 14? 1 through 11 is addendum, that is addendum? Okay. Actually like to move actions B1 and B through 11 as on the regular agenda, and then action item B2 on your addendum.
And I'll second the motion.
Is there any additional discussion? I know we had a lengthy Finance Committee report. No additional discussion? Mr. DeQuilla, would you mind doing the roll call vote?
Agenda items B1 through B11 with B2 being updated for the addendum. Mr. Gilfillan?
Yes.
Mr. Belding?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Franz?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Nonamaker?
Yes.
Ms. Weber?
Yes, thank you.
Agenda items passed 7-0.
Thank you very much. Ms. Clark, would you mind stepping in for Ms. Cronin to take care of the two curriculum items? If you wouldn't mind making a motion that Mr. Nonamaker will undoubtedly second.
I move curriculum items 1 through, no, 1 and 2, and I don't think there are any addendums for curriculum.
Nope, that's it, 1 and 2. Thank you very much. So the HIB and then the field trips.
I'll second the motion.
Well done.
No one's a better seconder.
Is there any additional discussion on C1 and C2? No, seeing none, Mr. DeQuilla?
Agenda items C1 and C2. Mr. Gilfillan?
Yes.
Mr. Belding?
Yes.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Franz?
Yes.
Ms. Kenny?
Yes.
Mr. Nonamaker?
Yes.
Ms. Weber?
Yes, thank you very much.
Agenda items passed 7-0.
Moving on to policy, there are none, correct? No audibles? No items for policy. Moving on to board business. Does any members of the board, I know we've been all finance all the time for the last 8 weeks. Anybody have any additional items they want to bring up?
No, I just wanted to make just a comment about our administration and with Park. I really can't, we are so lucky to have the rollout that we did. I'm seeing it from a different lens, and it is really, really challenging. And the hours that you've put in and training your teachers, your administrators, getting our students ready, I myself am thanking you as a parent, I'm thanking you as a fellow teacher. It hasn't been easy, and thank you. And hopefully it will continue to go a little smoother as we go, and it won't snow anymore, and won't have any hurricanes or anything, but thank you.
I will allow Ms. Chase to go home for an evening. Any additional board business? Seeing none, we have our second opportunity for public commentary. Again, if you would just step up to the mic, sign in, introduce yourself.
Hi, Donna Charles. Regarding what needs to be submitted to the executive county supervisor, is this proposal the way it is here? Is this what you're going to be submitting to the county board?
They got massive reams.
I can't exactly see what you're referencing,
Oh,
but
it's
item
what-
B2 for the budget goes to the executive county superintendent as part of probably about 2 inches of documents for our budget review.
Okay. But regarding the referendum end of it?
The referendum doesn't need to go to the executive county superintendent. It is legally reviewed and then presented to the voters.
Okay, so the county supervisor does not need to realize that you're requesting a referendum?
She is instructed that there is a referendum and does not get a yay or a nay on the district's ability to propose a question or how it proposes the questions to the public.
Okay, good to know, thank you. And my other question,
However, the project is submitted to the state.
Yes, they have
The
been
Department of
submitted.
Education?
They
Why
have
don't you
already been
review that?
submitted to the state and approved by the state.
to the...
Thank you, Mr. Belding.
Thank you. And my other question was, could you tell me what the the debt repayment curve for the new proposed referendum is. Yeah,
The payment schedule hasn't been developed since it hasn't been approved yet.
Question, basically, what kind of interest rate are you assuming, what 20 years, what's the average annual debt service?
Oh, the assumed interest rate is 3.5%, and it's payable over 20 years,
and
as was reported in all of the referendum meetings that we've had and is noted on the website.
We've got basically 25 million is going to get expended, about 3 million is going to come from the state, and then 22.
Mr. Carr, you're not on microphone, so we can't hear you. Neither am I. You're not on microphone, so we can't hear you, so.
Mr. Carr, the answer is yes. The answer is yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry, we can't hear if you talk from the audience. Does anybody else, if you would just step up to the mic, then we'll be able to hear you, record it. I know. If you could be brief, I'd appreciate it, or unique. New topic.
unique?
A new
Okay,
topic.
I'll be unique.
Oh, great.
It gets more confusing all the time. I mean, the state has approved it, but the county doesn't have to.
The state has not approved
He
it.
just said the state.
The state has to. They will get it.
Nobody's approved it yet, unless it gets
The state
voted
has-
on.
The state has approved all of the architectural drawings and specifications for each of the projects that have been considered under the referendum.
Approved to go forward to see if the vote is in.
Approved that we can proceed with the referendum question, and that the state has verified that we will get debt service on the eligible projects.
Okay. But the county doesn't have to have anything to do with it.
To the best of my knowledge, no.
And do you invite her to have anything to do with it, or him to have anything to do with it? I mean, is she aware of it, except for the 2 inches of budget package that you're going to send her? Is she going to see it? Does she know it's even there? Or he?
The bond counsel that we're dealing with and the financial advisors will follow all the necessary protocol.
The protocols are established by the state, not by us.
Okay,
We
so
follow
the referendum
protocols.
is yours for a while, and then they're going to get it approved, and it's ours, it's the boroughs and the townships. Like, it doesn't seem like, anybody is like really taking, responsibility for it on this side once it gets approved. It just doesn't sit right with me, and that's not unique, but I'm going to have to say it again.
That's all right. Thank you very much. Good evening, Mr. Heat.
Good evening, how are you? Bill Heap. New topic. I've been reading in the paper the past couple of weeks that there has been a movement developing, I guess especially in suburban districts, with this testing business, and that there have been a lot of people, our parents, opting out. I'm just wondering if you can give us a little bit of feel for whether there were a lot of parents who decided that they weren't going to participate in this series of tests.
You missed the first part of the meeting.
Sorry.
That's right. It's a good recap.
We've had a range of participation rates. So I'd say in grades, 3 through 5, we're probably 99% or something like that. Kids are taking tests. In the middle school, it's probably 95%. I don't have firm numbers with me, but it's not many kids. Juniors last week at the high school, this is the one number that is rather firm. We had about 60% of juniors take the test and a 40% refuse. A number of other districts that I keep in contact with regularly had much, much higher rates of test refusal, where they had the reverse, maybe 30% of students in the junior class take the test. Princeton, for example, had about 75% opt out school-wide. So that's where we stand now. We won't hit the participation rate that we're required to hit by the New Jersey Department of Education at the high school, but we look like we'll be in good shape in the other schools.
Thank you.
Good evening, Levy Moulin, Chatham Township. I saw Mr. Heath coming up, so my question. The meetings are televised up to April 20, up to the vote, I think. And I heard last time that the budget includes provisions for continuing the funding for that next year. Does that also cover the period from April 23rd to, I don't know when budget next year starts? There'll be like 6 or 7 sessions after the vote. Is that taken care of, or it's being considered, or?
Yeah, I think we can find the money.
Okay,
I mean, yes, it's budgeted for next
Okay.
year, but we're hoping to find the money.
okay.
As we get closer to the end of the year, there's, more.
Something to do? Okay,
We'll
great.
know.
In the same vein, that's going to be my last question. I think this was great for the community, reaching out and making this thing available in addition to attending. In past years, we have reached out to the administration and asked if the website of the school could be allowing like the township websites and the borough website for emails to be going out to the people who want to be subscribed. Whenever there is a meeting, they get an email, whenever there is something posted of interest. And I think at the time the limitation of the technology did not allow for that. So I don't know if it's a matter of changing who is hosting the server or something like that. And I guess there might be some cost with that. Is that something that is considered, can be considered?
That's an interesting idea. And you're, just so I'm clear, you're suggesting a subscription where the user signs in and says, I'd like to receive some type of...
Right, like on the township or on the borough, there's a place you say, please send me anything new coming up on the website.
So anytime something is updated on the website, the user would get a notification
Yeah,
to
you
go
can-
look?
Yes, they get an email to say there is a new meeting and this is the agenda, come, or there's a new program or whatever. I mean,
Right.
websites get organized differently
Yeah,
at
no, interesting,
our schools.
interesting concept.
Yeah, and it brings a lot of people to the meeting because they get an email pulling them in.
But
Now,
the township website has, about 25, links. Do you have to subscribe to each one? Or do you just have a general, anytime you change the website, shoot me an email?
there is a checkbox when you say everything, or you just check the ones you want, or...
All right.
I think there are different ways to do it.
All right,
But
very
the
good.
idea is to have something that can invite the
out.
people to come, reach out.
Very good, thank you.
Thanks.
Jane Devlin, my new question and topic is park. Could Dr. LaSusa please explain, I'm just confused now, did you say that now that there was not as much participation in the high school as was hoped for or anticipated, we did not meet these state guidelines or requirements? Could you explain that? And does that mean the kids that took it have now taken it for naught?
No Child Left Behind and the replacement, the ESEA waiver that New Jersey submitted for a few years ago requires that in order for your school, each individual school in your district to make what used to be called AYP, but now is called a progress target, you need to have a certain level of proficiency among your tested population and a certain participation rate in your tested population. So the participation level needs to be 95%. At least up until this year, if you had a school that didn't hit 95%, the school didn't make AYP or didn't make its progress target, and therefore it was labeled something like in need of improvement. And then typically the county would supply a school like that or a district like that with an action plan, a corrective action plan that the district had to enact. The jury's out right now because probably, the majority of high schools in New Jersey are not going to hit the 95% participation rate. So we will wait and see what is in store for us once the park results come in and the state has to certify through CUSAC and other means whether our schools have hit the marks that they're supposed to.
But the jury's out because you're saying the state might lower the percentage participation rate requirement, or do they have one for park right now at present, like when we were going in?
No, it's 95%, and I don't think the state has the ability to lower it because it's in the federal guidelines. But I think that the state is going to have a difficult time since they turn over half of their positions in the Department of Education every couple of months with giving every high school in New Jersey a corrective action plan and then following through on it. I think the numbers are just so significant this year with test refusal that they're not going to have the participation rates they've always had in the past.
So you're saying they might have to do something different?
That's
And if they just, for some reason out of our control, don't do something different? I'm not being like attacking, I'm confused now.
Well, I don't, we're
What
all
would happen
confused,
to
and
us?
I don't have the answer to that. They haven't told us what would happen to us.
If you could summarize, Jane, that would be...
Okay, I just needed a little clarification, because it is new on
new
everything
to all
with
of us.
it,
Thank
yeah.
you.
Okay, thank you again.
Thank you. So we're going to adjourn the public session. We have to step into executive session. No action will be taken. So we usually announce that in case often the press likes to stick around. So we're going to adjourn. We reconvene in public session, but no actions taken where we're heading off to. So thank you all for coming out. Have a great night.